Hello and welcome to the MMA Girl Podcast with your host, Jess. Thank you very much for coming and tuning in again. This is my 5th episode of my podcast, and if you guys like MMA, UFC, boxing, etc., then this is a nice place where we can talk about the latest news, the fight announcements, and all that good stuff. So thank you to all those who have already subscribed and are listening to me since I started. And thank you to any new subscribers that come off this video. Like, this is, amazing. Obviously, this weekend did not go as planned for most MMA fans on Saturday for UFC 313. We will be talking a lot about that because, as I usually do, I'm going to start off with the latest news and rumours that are coming out of the MMA world, and then move on to UFC 313, and also go on to the new fight card for this weekend, UFC Fight Night 254, featuring Vettori versus Dolidze. So there's a lot to talk about. As I said, UFC 313 has happened, so we've got a lot to say, we've got a lot to break down. Let's get started with the news and rumours. First thing I heard recently was about Dustin Poirier. So apparently, Dustin Poirier's last dance, his last fight, is going to be against Max Holloway. We've talked about this earlier on in my podcast episodes, that he wanted the legend to be his last opponent going out of his UFC career, his 14-year tenure at the UFC. And he said, Paddy Pimblett was rumoured to be his next opponent. And he said, no, guys. I want legends only. I want someone who either I've already fought or who have not fought yet, but that's a legend in this sport. And who better than to fight Max Holloway again? Like, I can't wait to see how this fight is going to go down. I think both fighters have improved so much. Dustin Poirier has shown, quite frankly, that he is one of the best fighters in this company. And it's going to be sad to see him leave when he does. But I'm going to be happy to see him leave with a fight against Max Holloway, whatever the outcome of that fight will be. This news comes according to Dariush, who apparently has inside information that basically the fight has already been signed for. So thank you, Dariush, for the information. As soon as he said that, I think he might have said that on a podcast or something, it just went wild. Everyone just, jumped onto the information. So I think if it's coming from him, he's saying that he's hearing the talks about it and it's going to be Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, then so be it. I'm happy as a fan. As many fans, I think you guys can agree, will be happy. I'm excited to see how that fight turns out. And as I said, both fighters have improved the fight game since the last time they fought. So it could be anyone winning that fight. But I think either way, this is why it's important to have a legacy fight like this one, because if Dustin Poirier wins or if Max Holloway wins, this is a fight that is so special and so amazing. It's like when Max Holloway had his fight against Korean Zombie, the moments after the fight had ended, even though the Korean Zombie obviously retired and hung up his gloves on a loss, it wasn't like he was losing to this new guy coming from nowhere. There was none of that. It was just, full respect. And I think Max Holloway is the best guy to have a send-off for Dustin Poirier. And I think Max is going to be saying to himself, listen, guys, I don't want to retire everyone. Please. Retire with other people at some point, please. Because at some point I'm going to want to retire and there'll be no one else who can retire you guys. So kudos to Max Holloway for being the choice for many of the fighters who want to go off with a bang and have a great fight before leaving the company. Congrats on the amazing 14-year career that Dustin Poirier has had, and we'll be sad to see him leave, but on a very high note at least. Other rumors I wanted to talk about before going on to UFC 313, Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall. Apparently, the ball's been starting to roll very quickly. Things have been signed. According to Tom Aspinall, everything is done on Jon Jones's front. On Jon Jones's end, things have been signed. Things have been agreed upon. They just need to find the date and the location, and then the fight will be officially announced for us fight fans. And I'm really excited to see that Dana White has pushed Jon Jones to sign the contract, because this is the natural continuation of the fight game in the UFC. As we've seen, obviously, UFC Dana White did say that if Alex Pereira was able to defend his belt against Ankalaev on Saturday, the super fight between him and Jon Jones would have been an option, and that put in jeopardy the idea of a unification fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. But unfortunately for Alex Pereira, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. And sometimes you just have to admit, Alex Pereira, he started off in the middleweight division. He's now up to the light heavyweight division. I think it's a great weight class for him. But let's admit, if he goes up to the heavyweight division, it's not going to be the same story, guys. You know, against Ankalaev, it didn't go so well. But in the heavyweight division, I just think it just would not go well at all. So maybe the fact that he lost his fight against Ankalaev and that the Jon Jones fight has been a bit pushed aside and off the table, basically, maybe that's a good thing in the end. Jon Jones also wanted that legacy fight. But it was best off to unify the belts. I think that was the best option to go for. So I think Tom Aspinall must be very happy to hear that things are actually finally starting to show some signs of happening. You know, he said to the UFC, and he announced on his TikTok and his YouTube that he has refused all fights since his last fight, because he said, I want that unification fight. I'm not defending my interim title yet another time. It's not happening again. So we'll be seeing a Jon Jones Tom Aspinall fight. This would happen in summer. Apparently it's the 20th of June, but I don't think the dates are very concrete yet. But it should be happening this summer, UFC 317 or 318. Who knows? But I'm just very happy that finally we have some news on that front. Another thing I wanted to go on was UFC 314 is happening in less than a month now. We saw last week at the UFC 313 press conference that some of the fighters that are going to be fighting next month were able to have it on the mics at a pre-press conference for the UFC 314 pay-per-view. And we saw the likes of Diego Lopez and Alexander Volkanovski, Paddy Pimblett, Chandler, Prates, Jeff Neal, and of course, Jean Silva and Bryce Mitchell. Those were the 4 fights that were featured at the UFC 313 press conference. And those guys were able to have it on a bit on the mics before they were squared up. As you could see, Jean Silva and Bryce Mitchell had some harsh words for each other. But that's what the fight game's all about. Sometimes the fighters don't respect each other at all and just want to tear each other apart. And this is what's going to happen, guys. A lot of people are saying, is this going to be Jean Silva's forward check? Or are we going to see Bryce Mitchell get obliterated like we did when he fought Josh Emmett in a very violent style? Who knows what's going to happen in that fight, but I'm just excited to see how that's going to play out. And it's always a little bit more exciting when both guys want to unalive each other. We don't know what we're going to get from the fight. Apart from that, obviously we saw Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez have it on the mic, but both guys, as you know, are very respectful, very, very kind. They're not the kind of guys that would insult their opponents or pick on their weak spots because they want to get into their heads. That is not the type of fight we're going to see, guys. This is for the vacant UFC featherweight title, so this is kind of a big deal for both guys, especially for Diego Lopez, who has never had a title fight yet in his UFC career. I feel like he's getting better and better as we see him every fight. So I'm very excited for him that he's going to be having a title fight against Alexander Volkanovski. So that's just great news on the Diego Lopez front. And of course, Paddy Pimblett Chandler. You know, what can I say? Those guys, this is going to be a great fight. Both guys want to finish each other. Paddy said that I'm going to finish him, and Chandler said I'm levels above him, so he's going to see what it's like to be in the cage with me. And that's just, you know, great news for us fight fans, because it's going to be another show. UFC 314 is looking to be one of the best pay-per-views I've seen in quite a while. Like this pay-per-view is stacked. This is a real stacked card. I mean, you know, every card for the UFC numbered pay-per-views are always very exciting, but this one just feels different. Hopefully there won't be any cancellations or any illnesses or injuries before the UFC 314 pay-per-view comes around. I don't want to jinx it, but as you know, we've got Manon Fiorot and Shevchenko fighting, as well as Bilal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena, with all the fights I just named. So plus we have Prates and Jeff Neal, who face to face looked very much ready to fight each other. So this is going to be very exciting. This is going to be insane. So I'm very excited for next month. But next week's UFC London, and I will be there at UFC London on the 22nd of March. So if any of you guys are going to UFC London, come say hi. This is going to be great. Last bit of news before we move on to UFC 313's main card and prelims is, of course, at UFC 313, the beloved UFC Hall of Famer, or to future Hall of Famer, should I say. Robbie Lawler was officially inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame class of 2025 during his visit to the T-Mobile Arena on Saturday night at Vegas, Nevada for UFC 313. I don't know if he was expecting this. I don't think so, but he was a well-deserved inductee to the class of the Hall of Fame, and I'm very happy to see him being honoured by the UFC and honoured by everyone that was around him. I think there was Merab who was sat next to him. Kamaru Usman wasn't far away. I think there was also Khalil Roundtree just behind him. They were all rooting for him, and he's a legend that inspired a lot of fighters to start fighting, so I'm really happy for him. Congratulations on Robbie Lawler's induction to the UFC Hall of Fame class of 2025. You were well deserved in that category. You were well deserved. So that's it for the rumors and fight news that I have for you guys that I was interested in this week. Let's move on to UFC 313 and all that crazy stuff. Right, guys, so this has to be done. We have to go over UFC 313. It wouldn't be an MMA Girl podcast without going over last week's UFC Fight Night, and this time around it was UFC 313. So I'm going to go over the highlights and the major events that happened at UFC 313. Obviously, we're going to go over the whole main card and some of the prelims, but starting off, there were a lot of low blows in less than 2 fights. There were 4 low blows, and I think in the main card there were at least 2 other low blows. I don't know what was happening on that evening. I don't know if guys wanted to get inspired by Alex Pereira's high kicks and low kicks and were like, let's just kick every one of our opponents, and unfortunately miss a lot of the ones that we were kicking. There were a lot of low blows, so a lot of timeouts. A lot of the refs must have been annoyed that there was so many timeouts, but that was just a silly comment from my part on the low blow situation at UFC 13. But if you guys watched it from start to finish, you'll remember what I'm talking about. There were a lot of low blows that night. Second thing to note, unfortunately, we had 2 fights cancelled at the last minute just before they came out, literally before the fight started, including Curtis Blades' fight was cancelled because apparently there was an illness going around the UFC PI, and both Curtis Blades and another guy who was fighting, can't remember his name, had to come out and had to pull out their fights. So both fights were cancelled at the very last minute. So instead of starting at in French time at half midnight, it started at 1:30 a.m. in France. I don't know what time it is where you were, but in any case, we had an hour to wait for the fights to start in the end because those 2 fights were cancelled off the prelim card. So that was disappointing because I was hoping to see Curtis Blades fight again. So I was quite disappointed with that, but c'est la vie, as they say in France. And of course, that's the fight game. Sometimes there are last minute changes. So that's what happens. 2 fights cancelled. So the card started off a bit jinxed, I would say. Let's just put it that way. A notable robbery from the prelim card was obviously the Myron Santos and Francis Marshall match. Everyone had Francis Marshall winning that fight. Even Joe Rogan, once he saw Santos getting his hand raised, he looked so confused, as did everyone, I think. And Marshall was so disappointed to see that he lost the split decision against Santos. Santos obviously will defend his victory because, that I'd get it. If it was my victory, I would have defended myself as well. I don't see how he won that fight. I don't think, again, the judges saw the same fight as we did. But they consider that Santos won, so Santos won the fight for them, and that's what's been put on the books. But unfortunately for Marshall, he got robbed. Let's just put it that way. 2 notable victories from the prelim card before we go into the main card were Carlos Leal versus Morono. First round KO for Carlos Leal. An intense start. It started off really heavy hitting, and it ended up that way. Didn't last long, and he just got in there with a very efficient, dominant victory. So kudos to Carlos Leal. He wasn't favourite in this fight, I don't think. Morono was. And as I said last week, I was excited to see Morono coming back, and I would have loved to see him in the win column, but it just wasn't his night. So he got finished by TKO in less than 1 round. So congratulations to Carlos Leal for that victory, and hopefully we'll be seeing Morono come back into the win column the next time he fights. The other fight that I want to talk about from the prelims was obviously the fight between Brunno Ferreira and Armen Petrosian, which was a very intense, insane fight. Second round submission for Brunno Ferreira. Insane armbar that looked amazing, beautifully done. He seemed to have gone into there with a great takedown that was literally like a spear, basically. He speared him and took him down and then armbarred him. It was just a flawless victory for Brunno Ferreira, who is a very tough cookie because Petrosian's not an easy fight to take. So I'm hoping we'll see Brunno Ferreira compete against another ranked opponent next time we see him, because he looks like he's going to be a real threat in the middleweight division, guys. Brunno Ferreira, he reminds me a bit of Duplessis with the same sort of really stocky build. They're a bit shorter but very thick, very muscly, very big. Congratulations to Brunno Ferreira. Good luck on the rest of your career. I think it's going to be a great career, so I'm not worried about him at all. Next up, so we're going to be talking about the main card now. First fight on the main card, Rufi versus King Green. What an insane KO that was. Instant headshot, dead. Not a TKO, no ground and pound. Rufi performed what I was told was a flying wheel kick, as Ariel Hawani described it on his Twitter just after the KO, in 2 minutes and 7 seconds of the first round. Honestly, an instant KO, insane mic drop moment. Everyone was crazy mad. Bobby went to sleep. Caio Borralho was insanely excited. He was in his corner, of course. And Caio Borralho, as I said to you guys last week, he said, you guys are going to discover someone that I already know is one of the best fighters in the UFC. Or even the best fighter I know myself personally, and you guys are going to discover that every time you see him in a fight, he's going to shock you every single time. And he said, word for word, before the fight started, do not blink. And that is actually the best way to describe this. Do not blink. In 2 minutes and 7 seconds, Bobby Green was sleeping on a cloud right above him, and he was just gone. The fighting nerds are very, very dangerous, guys. I think we should take them very much more seriously. I personally said that I thought maybe Bobby Green would win this match by KO or decision. I'm going to eat my words, and I'm never going to bet against the fighting nerds ever again, even if one day they're obviously going to lose. They're currently 18-0 at the UFC. That's saying something, guys. And at UFC 314, we're going to see 2 fighting nerds in one night. I mean, I'm not betting against them. I'm just telling you in advance. But amazing spinning wheel kick from Rufi. Amazing KO. He was literally headshot off. So let's go on to the second fight. Lemos versus Lucindo. I predicted Lucindo would have the victory. But that wasn't how that turned out. It wasn't her night. Lucinda seemed a bit overwhelmed by Lemos's skills. Lemos being a very veteran fighter, she demonstrated in the first 2 rounds that she was a dominant opponent here, and she was a dominant fighter in the fight. She owned the cage and she owned the fight. Won by decision, could have won by submission, but it's in the end, a win's a win. So Lemos in the winning column again, a decision win for Lemos, a unanimous decision win for Lemos. So hopefully we'll see Lucindo come back. She's only 23, so she's got time. And yeah, let's move on to the next fight. Obviously, we saw Jalen Turner versus Bahamondes, where Bahamondes was able to sneak in the submission win against Jalen Turner. He managed to turn it around because obviously Jalen Turner was on top of Bahamondes, and he was able to turn it around and do a triangle choke with his long legs. It was just insane. I've never seen something like that in my life, and I think his long legs were his advantage in this fight for Bahamondes, and obviously his creativity and his ability to get out of situations where he is being smothered by his opponent or dominated by his opponent. Bilal Muhammad was obviously in his corner and was shouting from the corner saying, get out of there, get back on the feet. But Bahamondes had other ideas and said, no, I'm going to get out of it the way I can, and I'm going to choke him out. So his long legs came into use, and he had a great triangle choke victory against Jalen Turner. The sad news, however, is that Jalen Turner, following his fight against Bahamondes, has decided to retire. He immediately after the fight decided to retire. He told Bahamondes, I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it looks like he was telling Bahamondes, no, I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. Thank you very much, but I just can't do this anymore. And Bahamas immediately suggested that he come in and he train with him at his gym, and that he see whether he can, rejudge Jalen Turner's fighting style and his motivation to fight. I'm not sure if his decision is final, but as we saw in the UFC lounge just after the fight at backstage, he really did look like he was done. He said it was mainly due to his mental health, because physically he's young, he's physically fit, he's been fighting for a long time at the UFC, and unfortunately he has decided to hang up the gloves today, for the time being. So if this is the last time we saw Jalen Turner, then I'm very sad to say goodbye. But if for his mental health, it's better off that he pursue other ventures, then so be it. It's not a nice way to see a guy so young and with so much potential leave the sport like that. But he said after UFC 300, he obviously lost his last fight. He said that he was looking to come back in the win column, and he thought that he would win against Bahamondes, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. So if that's the last time we saw you, Jalen, thank you so much for your fights. Thank you so much for your service to the UFC. But I hope it's not the last time we see you. Really, I hope not. Get well soon. In any case, get well soon. Next up, the co-main event of the evening, Justin Gaethje versus Fiziev. I predicted that Justin Gaethje would lose this fight. I was clearly very wrong about that, and very happily wrong. I was very happy to be wrong about that. I just realistically, I thought as both fighters were going to look for the KO. I just thought back to the Max Holloway Justin Gaethje fight and saw, flashbacks of them just throwing their fists around and Justin Gaethje not having that precision that Max Holloway was able to use against him and knock him out in the last second of the last round. But that doesn't mean that Justin Gaethje wasn't capable of coming back into the win column, by all means. And as we've seen in his fight against Fiziev, he's still got it, guys. He's 36 years old. He now says that he wants the title. He said that I think I've done enough to make Dana and Hunter give me a title shot. So they might be considering putting him against the Makhachev in the near future. I hope so. Maybe it'll be this year, maybe next year, but Justin does not have that much time on the clock left, so hopefully he'll be getting his title shot in the near future. He's third ranked in the UFC lightweight division, so why not? Regarding the fight itself, Justin Gaethje had landed over 70% of his jabs and strikes that he was throwing, and they were looking really hard. So Fiziev, as Justin Gaethje said, he's a tough MF. He was not an easy opponent at all. This is why I thought Fiziev might grab the victory, because he wasn't going to be an easy opponent. Even if he was coming on short notice, Fiziev was so hungry and ready and waiting for this fight that he just couldn't compose himself. But unfortunately, that didn't mean that he was going to win. So Justin Gaethje had a great dominant performance in his fight. Some scares, some takedowns, some knockdowns from Justin Gaethje onto Fiziev, but that was just not enough to put him away. At least he got the win. A win's a win. The fight was obviously a fight of the night contender, and it was fight of the night eventually when we found out who got the bonuses. On a side note, Bahamondes got the bonus of 50,000 for his submission, so great for him as well. And this fight was a classic. It's one for the books, guys. So congratulations to Justin Gaethje, and I hope he'll get his title shot in the near future. On the Fiziev front, however, Fiziev has stated that he feels like he's too small for the lightweight division, and has confirmed to Ariel Helwani that he wants to move down to the featherweight division. So, I mean, that's a great idea. We saw Joaquin Buckley do the same thing when he moved down from middleweight to welterweight, and it's going super well for him. So maybe Fiziev has found what was missing and will maybe be a lot better in the featherweight division. So let's see how that happens. In any case, I'm happy to see these both guys looking good. Even though Fiziev lost, he looked great. Justin Gaethje just reminded us why he's called the highlight. So I'm very proud and happy to be a fan of Justin Gaethje right now. So yeah, let's move on to the main event. Alex Pereira versus Ankalaev. And for Alex Pereira fans, we left with our tails between our legs and sobbing because Alex lost his belt on Saturday night, of course. Honestly, a well-deserved win from Ankalaev. I think you have to be objective and look at things in the way that analysts look at fights and say to yourself, was he deserving of that title? Yes, he was. Is it sad to see Alex lose his belt? Of course. For any fight fan, it was really hard to see. Alex was and still is currently, I think, the biggest star in the company, and we'll forever be thanking Israel Adesanya for bringing him to the UFC, for encouraging him to follow him to the UFC after their kickboxing adventures. So, that nothing takes away from the impact and the run he has had in the UFC. Not to mention the amount of non-fight fans that have become fight fans because of Alex Pereira, how the UFC has become, and MMA in general has become even more mainstream thanks to Alex Pereira and his contribution to this industry. So can't take anything away from what he's done in the past, and he has defended his belt so many times. Obviously, there was these rumors that he'd taken a bit too much time off. He wasn't looking as fit. He wasn't looking as put together. I think it was just the fighting style that Ankalaev came with to the table was just too overwhelming for Alex. Quite simply, I don't think there's any way around it. The fighting scorecards were quite mixed, but obviously all three judges gave the win to Ankalaev. So as a lot of people were saying, Alex looked a bit stiff. He looked put off by Ankalaev's strategy, and I think Ankalaev came with enough strategies to the table. Alex does quite a lot of, lands quite a lot of body kicks. He's very precise when he's jabbing. His striking is not all over the place. He really waits until he's got the best moment to strike. A lot of the times where there was no action because they were both sizing each other up, and you're just, you screaming at the screen saying, why are you not hitting him? Why are you not striking? But that's just part of the game plan to neutralize the other guy's game plan. So unfortunately, Alex was the one that came out with the loss. And after the fight, he said, it's a shame that we let people win fights when they fight in that way, because that's what would encourage more people to fight in that way. I don't think we should take anything away from Ankalaev. He won that fight fair and square. But the beautiful sport of MMA obviously is that much more beautiful when we get a real brutal fight, when we get some real brutal moments, and there's a lot of action-packed rounds. Obviously this time around it wasn't as action-packed as some of the fights we've seen, especially from Alex Pereira, but I think we'll see him come back. The negotiations have already been put in place for the revenge match, so we'll be seeing Ankalaev Pereira too. We did see, however, a very important moment from Bruce Buffer on Saturday night, if some of you noticed. Everyone's been talking about it on social media since then, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my goodness, he said the one and the only Alex Pereira. This is insane. Saying the one, the only is something very much, it's a very privileged title to receive from Bruce Buffer when he's announcing your name in the octagon. So much so, as there's only been 3 people in the history of the UFC where Bruce Buffer is announced as the one and the only, including Alex Pereira. The other 2 being John Jones and Conor McGregor. So it's a huge accolade for Alex Pereira to be called the one, the only Alex Pereira. And I think that's something he can take to the grave. That's just an insane achievement in its own. Conor McGregor has lost fights. He's not unbeatable, invincible, and yet still he was the one, the only, because it's a whole package. You've got Alex Pereira as a fighter he's an amazing fighter, but also the personality that he has, the aura that Alex Pereira has, makes him that just so much more special. And you can tell because people just love the guy from everywhere. And as I said, he's brought people to the sport that would never have watched MMA in the first place. So he well deserved the one, the only. But just, sadly, it comes just before his first loss in a while. So I'm excited to see Alex come back. I think it would be nice to see him take a bit of a break and actually go on holiday outside of his camp and just, take some time out for his kids. Obviously, if you guys saw in the videos, his 2 sons were obviously ringside and they were sobbing. Seeing their father lose after so many victories is very hard to see. But that's life. People lose fights, as we always see in this fight game. Sunday morning's fight between Alex Pereira and Ankalaev, and just the whole card in general, ending on that kind of low note for us fight fans, that just reminded me of how fickle the fight business is, and how you can love someone one day and the next day they could be gone. In a few days, we've got Saturday's Fight Night, UFC Fight Night 254 at the Apex. So let's move on to that straight away and get off the low notes and get off the sobbing. Vettori and Dolidze are fighting again. This is their second fight. Just a reminder that last time these guys met in the cage, Vettori came out victorious with a decision win. So is this going to be the revenge of Dolidze, or is Vettori going to be 2-0 against Dolidze? I'm going to be predicting the 6 fights on the main card. First fight on the main card of UFC's 254 Fight Night pay-per-view at the Apex is Song Woo Choi versus Kevin Vallejos. Kevin Vallejos coming out of Argentina and Choi coming out of South Korea. There is a huge age gap between the two fighters, 10-year age gap. Choi is not that old. He's 32 years old. So it's just obviously Vallejos, his opponent is very young. I'm going to choose the spring chicken. I'm going to choose Vallejos by second or third round TKO. I'm feeling a late finish from Vallejos in this one. For the next fight, this card is actually moved around a little bit because there was a fight between AJ Cumming and Yu Soo-young that appears to be cancelled, and now replacing the fight is Dyer Nogze, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, versus Brendanson Ribeiro. Dyer, who has 0 defeats for now, and Ribeiro, who has 7 defeats with 16 victories. I'm going to go for Ribeiro. I'm going to go for Ribeiro by third or second round TKO or submission, bearing in mind that his opponent is undefeated. I think he's going to lose the 0 on Saturday night. So I'm going for Ribeiro, guys. Next, our third fight on the main card, Damon Blackshear versus Cody Gibson. I think this fight is going to stay on the feet because these guys are both great on the ground, and they have a tendency to finish their opponents by submission. So a lot of these fights, when we see two guys that are really good on the ground, we see them not really wanting to go to the ground because they'll neutralize each other out. So I think this will stay on the feet, and I think Cody Gibson will get the win here by decision. Next up, we have Alexander Hernandez versus Kurt Holloway. Holloway being the veteran between the two of them, who is 38 years old. Alexander Hernandez being 32 years old. I think in this fight, it could go either way, but I'm going to go with Kurt Holloway by a late submission in the second or third round of this fight. And for the co-main event, Chidi Njokuani versus Zaleski dos Santos. Njokuani has a huge reach advantage in this fight. But despite that, I'm going to go for Santos via decision or late TKO in the second or third round. I don't think Njokuani will beat Santos on this evening. Even though Santos is 38, Njokuani is 36. There's not a huge age gap, but when you reach a certain age, that you can be a bit rusty, you can have a bit of ring rust. But I'm going to go for Dos Santos on this one with a late TKO in the second or third round or a decision. Next up, we have Marvin Vettori, of course, for our main event against Roman Dolidze on, as I said, their second bout together, coming off a victory for Vettori against Dolidze. Dolidze with 14 wins and 3 losses, compared to Vettori's 19 wins and 7 losses and 1 no contest. This time around, I'm going to go for Dolidze. I think he's going to come with a vengeance. Since they last met, Dolidze has been on a tear. If you guys remember, we saw him last time against Anthony Smith, the Lionheart, and he won against Anthony Smith. Notably, he was not in his natural weight class. He had to go up a weight class to fight Anthony Smith. So he fought in the light heavyweight division, whereas normally he's in the middleweight division. So props to Dolidze for fighting in a higher weight class and winning. So he got the decision win over Anthony Smith. Props to him for that. It's not an easy feat to move up and win your fight. So I think in this fight, Dolidze has what it takes to beat Vettori. This fight is over 5 rounds instead of 3, so you've already got a bit more time for both guys to get their game plan rolling. And I think Vettori won't have what it takes to beat Dolidze. Dolidze is just a solid guy who has very much improved since they last met. Vettori's on the rise right now. He's a very effective, efficient fighter, but there's still holes in his game, and I think Dolidze will be able to capitalize on those little holes in his fight game. So I'm going to go with Dolidze, as I said, by decision or late TKO in the third or fourth round, TKO or a decision from Dolidze. So that were my quick fire predictions for UFC 254's Fight Night pay-per-view main card. Don't forget to check out this fight card. As I said, don't sleep on the Apex and don't sleep on the prelims either. There are some exciting matches in the prelims. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. That was the MMA Girl Podcast, episode 5. Comment down below what you thought of UFC 313. What are your thoughts for Saturday's UFC Fight Night card at the Apex? Are my predictions in line with yours? And what are your thoughts and feelings about today's episode? Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next week for a new episode of the MMA Girl Podcast. Thank you very much for watching.